Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay, and this episode is brought to you by our patrons and supporters on the Bestseller Academy. We have 2 new patrons this week as well, Elizabeth Red and Kelly McCabe. Let's pipe them aboard along with the others. Thank you to everyone who keeps this show going. We simply could not do it without you.
Absolutely. And how are you, Mr. Stay?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm slightly frazzled because my proof pages arrived this week, and I've been sitting here basically muttering to myself because I read them aloud and muttering to myself all week. So I'm halfway through and I've gone a bit cross-eyed and wobbly. It's important to get up, and I've got a lot of housework done. You have to get up and get the circulation going. It's very good.
I half expected you to be curled up in a corner with a half-used box of Kleenex and a half-empty packet of Hobnobs just to comfort food as you go through, because I know that can be a hard thing, can't it?
Yeah, no, I've got to keep moving around.
Keep moving.
Get the blood flow
That's
going.
important.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what they do say? For anyone else who's wondered about this, there is a very important thing, and as writers, we do sit on our butts a lot, but movement helps to change our state. And that's why it's good to get up and about. So yeah, if you tend to find that you're kind of not feeling too great, get out for a walk, and get moving, in whichever way you can. It really does help. So excellent stuff. And Mr. Stay, I'm super excited this week because we have a new opening of the Bestseller Academy happening at the beginning of September.
The rumours are true.
The rumours are true. So if you're interested in jumping on board and becoming an academate and getting courses and coaching from Mark and myself throughout the whole year and all the support of the incredible community we've got, pop over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And it's been quite a year, hasn't it, Mark? I mean, we've just been reflecting that it's been a year since we launched the Academy, and it's quite mind-blowing just to see the progress that the writers have made inside the Academy.
Well, it's evolved into something really wonderful, the people who are in the academics, the people in the academy have helped evolve that thing. So just before this recording, we had our weekly post-podcast chat. So if you're a member of the academy, we will talk about the podcast we had last week and all the issues coming up. So we were talking about the Mick Finley episode last week. We were talking about psychology, historical research, all kinds of stuff. And everyone's making a contribution. And it's evolved into this wonderful community of writers, supportive writers, all helping each other up, all kind of boosting each other's confidence. And now, of course, towards the end of that year, we're starting to see, projects that were a blurb, a few lines on a page, now going out in submission, now being completed. Not everyone's doing that. Some people are taking longer, because this isn't, I know we did the Bestseller Experiment and it was like 12 months and we'll get something out. But writing, as we'll hear from our guest today, and as we'll talk about later, it's a never-ending journey. It's a continuous thing. It never ever stops.
It is, isn't it? It's a lifelong journey. In some ways, you can't commit to it for a few days. When we keep using this saying in the academy that writing is a marathon, not a sprint. And what I find really fascinating, we always had this sense, having worked on the podcast for 5 years, learning about there's so many different types of writers out there. We thought we could find the 7 secret habits of every writer, and we knew that there are really important core principles. But the one thing we do know for certain is that every single writer is unique. And so we create the Academy, made a very specific decision to create the Academy as a choose your own adventure, where we recognize every single writer that comes into the Academy has unique needs, has unique lifestyles. We had someone come to coaching last week. It was absolutely brilliant. We had a load of people come to the coaching, and they submit their questions in advance. And then when we both, whether it's life coaching on my side and the craft coaching on your side, but right in the middle of the screen was the lovely Rose, and on her lap was her very young, I think probably toddler, maybe younger than toddler, son sitting on her lap. And here's a mum who's like studying, has got a family, it's all on the go, and yet she's able to turn up because she knows how important that is for her. And I think with a lot of people, in fact, a lot of stories I've heard in the academy, there's so many people who are so busy in life that they've always put writing off. Writing's always going to be one of those things they do when they find the time, or in some cases when they retire. But what we all know is that life never gets any less busy. If you speak to anyone, I always remember my parents saying when they got retired, I said, what are you going to do with all the time? We've never been busier. We've got this club and this thing, we're volunteering here. And it even in retirement, it's a myth and a fallacy to think that one day you'll have enough time for writing. You have to fit writing around your busy life, and snatching 20 minutes to write your 200 words a day and coming to a coaching session, keeping that thread. I mean, you've seen this in your life, haven't you, Mark, since you kind of, left the publishing industry and became, full-time writer. Life doesn't get any less busy, does it, when you suddenly have a bit extra time?
Extra time? No chance. No, it's my day is crazy busy, and it's not just the writing, but it's all the stuff that comes with it as well. But the day fills up. As to quote Radiohead, a life fill up like a landfill. It just keeps piling on. Yeah. But I do that. My writing time, I still carve time around it. I used to work around my commute, half hour on the train, hour for lunch, half an hour at home. I'm still writing about 2 hours a day, but the difference is it's solid. It's from 7:30 in the morning to 9:30 in the morning. And that's the sacred time. And then I deal with all the other stuff, including, doing bits of housework and stuff as well. But yeah, it's you've got to carve out that precious, sacred little moment where you can shut the door and have fun with your characters and creating new worlds and telling wonderful stories.
Yeah, and for many people, we found that the accountability side of things is very hard when they're doing it on their own, and that's, I think, where the Academy's really helped a lot of people, and that they actually have something to show up to. They have a really great thing we've launched recently is this writing buddies, and that means that every single day you have a writing buddy that you're sending your word count to. It literally takes 2 minutes, but what's great is it prompts you. If they send you their writing count for the day beforehand, it kind of makes you think, oh, I've got to get mine in, and you kind of add it at work as this like tag team. And even just after the first few months of doing this, we've seen the incredible results of people who are even struggling to write at all during the week. We'll hear about some wins later on, people actually getting their first ever week streak, of writing 7 days in a row. And so for many of us, it's the accountability that's missing in our writing life. We just, it's incredibly hard to be disciplined as a writer. Again, it goes to all the distractions that we have as well. But I think about 95% of writers need accountability, external accountability.
Accountability is a kind of scary word. It might conjure up images of being dragged to the front of the class and I haven't done my homework. But all it is just checking in. And the writer buddy thing is brilliant because you've got a friendly face there. You're both in the same boat. You're both trying to achieve the same goals. There's no one-upmanship. You are friends on a journey, helping each other out. I still use, whenever I do my words every day, I still log them on the 200 words a day thing because I like it. I like to check in and just let people know still writing, I'm still relevant.
Yeah.
So, and it helps me and it gives me a sense of satisfaction at the end of a writing session, done. Cool. Excellent.
I want to share something with you, Mark. I journal every day and I find that's a really important thing to do. And it's good writing practice as well, funny enough. But I was journaling last night actually. And there was a question that came up in a book that I was reading, and it said the question was, if you look back, if this was the last week of your life, and you looked back over your life today, like what things that you've done in your life would you say were you most pleased about doing? Like, what are the highlights of the things that you did? And it's a really interesting question because it really cuts to the chase. It really stop and think, like, what are the things that were the most relevant things that you did in amongst all the crazy busy things that we do. And, one of the things that I wrote was, actually two of the things actually were book related. Three things. One was this podcast, because I think, it's been 5 years. We've built an incredible amount of of interviews, and that's out there in the world now, and that's helping people. We know it's helping people every day. So that's a real kind of important thing that this podcast brought to the world. But I've also written down here, Writing Back to Reality with Mark was one of them, and the other one was publishing Jenny's very last monster book. And it's interesting when you actually look at the whole, many years that we've now been alive and been blessed with this, these days that we're still getting. It's funny that when many more, right? But what's really interesting is that when you boil it down, I challenge any writer to do this exercise and ask the question: is your book, or is the book you're currently writing, or is the book that you published, or all the books you published, on that list? And I would 100% guarantee that they will be, because writing a book is one of the most important things you can do in your life. It's something that lives beyond us. It's something that we can show for all the years that we've been here. It's something kind of tangible, and it's like a work of art, literally. And so if you're thinking about, your life, and you're dwelling on what you want to be doing with your own writing career moving forward and your writing dreams, write that list. What are you most proud of that you've achieved in your life? And if you haven't, if you feel there's a big hole, and it's because you haven't written a book, then that's another reason to think about getting the extra support and accountability. So when you look at your life, when you look back at your life, Mark, you've had some incredible things happen in your life. The films, the books, how high up the list are they for you?
Well, I'm assuming we're putting family on another tier.
Of course, yeah. The first thing I've got here is bringing up my children, having a wonderful relationship with my wife, all these different things, absolutely. But then,
having kids that aren't serial killers, always a bonus. Always they're still young, still plenty of time.
Well, yeah,
but,
maybe maybe on film that'd be fine, but not in real life, right? Oh my gosh.
I think just getting to a point in my life where I can write and be happy. That's a big one for me. And we'll talk later on, because I want to talk later on about how a writer measures success. And we'll talk about that in more detail. But writing the books that I want to write, getting to see what I've written on a screen, and actually this podcast is by far and away the best thing I ever did as a writer, because I'm learning every day. I'm in the academy. I'm learning from the academates. I'm learning from the guests that we talk to. You go back and listen to me in those first few episodes. And one of the things we're doing in the academy is we're letting them see. Should we tell?
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna let academates see the first 3 or 4 chapters of the first draft of Back to Reality, which had a different title then. It's called 4224 or something.
Yeah.
And going back, just the other day, because we're preparing that for them, I'm doing like a director's commentary on, marking things up, going, what was I thinking? We cut all this. Me and Mr. D had an argument over this one word. And looking at it and thinking, I'm a different writer now, completely different. All that outlining, that's gone. All of that. And I've learned so much. So, this, in terms of my writing, this podcast is number one. Absolutely.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, actually, it was funny. We had the academates push us, so saying, we want to see the first draft of the book. And I was just looking through it literally before we came on air this morning. And I had to say to you, that's the chapter that it's gone. It's never appeared in the book. Whoosh. Chapter 1 of our book, the very first kind of hard conversation we had with our editor was about chapter 1. And she basically said to us, Jenny, bless her heart, she said to us, chaps, that chapter has to go. And we were like, what? No, it's like the whole set. She goes, yeah, it's the setup. It's to get to the action, right? Yeah. And it's so weird. And I think a lot of authors don't do this. They don't kind of, especially giving time to it, like going back after like 3-4 years now, you really have that distance to be able to see how things have changed and how different you see things. But I want to thank the academates who pushed us to put that up there, because it's been a really fascinating thing for us to, but it's also the great thing is it it wasn't great, was it? I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't that.
It was.
I mean, compared to how it finished up, it's a good reminder of like first drafts are always,
Yeah, it was treading water. There's a couple of important bits of information in there. They just get folded in later on in action. But weirdly, the chapter after that hardly changed at all, because that really does deliver in terms of story and character. And then the chapter after that, again, gone. Not needed. So it's weird. But
it's
you don't miss
fascinating.
it. I don't miss it. Do you?
No, I don't. I don't. But I think it's, like you say, it's really good. I think it's a good exercise for people to do, is to go back and look at their earlier work, especially if they are still questioning whether they're any good at writing. Because the one thing that we know, in the Academy, and having done this podcast for so many years, we know that the more you write, the better you get. You do not become a worse writer by writing and practicing. We know it's like, I was trying to do keepy uppies outside the other day. Like my son left a football. I haven't done keepy uppies. So keepy uppies is like trying to get a football in the air, like stopping it from hitting the ground. My son left the ball out in the garden, and I was like walking back to the house from the studio, and it was getting dusk, put the chickens to bed, and I thought, I haven't kicked a football in ages. And I said to myself, okay, challenge myself, 10 keepy uppies, then I can go inside. I was out there for an hour.
4 hours later,
chasing this. I was chasing the ball. I was getting really annoyed. I was like, I thought I used to be able to do about like 100 of these 10 years ago. I've got a bit of a knee problem, which is why I haven't been kicking a ball in the last few years. But But I was but I realized that it's just practice. And eventually I stuck with it. I got my 10. I felt really good. And now my goal is I have to do 10 keepy uppies before I go back into the house every night. And I'm just going to see how much easier it gets. And so you don't get worse by practicing. You can only get better. So if you're still one of these writers, and we know they exist, we're all part of those writers. There's many of them in the Academy. I don't think my writing is good enough. I don't think my writing will ever be good enough. Look back and read something that you wrote even last year or 5 years ago, and look backwards to see how much you've improved. Don't keep looking forwards all the time at your favorite writer in the world and say, I'm never going to be as good as them. Because that's what most people do. They always are looking up, which is good. I mean, you want to aspire to become as good as them, but you've got to look backwards occasionally and say, look where I've come from. Wow, I've really grown as a writer. And
I'm just trying to imagine all those chickens, their heads bopping up and down, watching you going, what is he doing?
I know. We think chickens are weird, but they're watching us going, what is the point of that? Like, what is he doing? It's funny, isn't it? Oh, dearie me. But anyway, we're going to talk more about some of the incredible things that have happened in the Academy after our interview, including, as a little preview, I want to share with you one of the things that I'm most blown away at is that we have a forum called Share Your Wins on the Academy, and it's where we ask people to put all of their wins, small and large. Some of them are huge, some of them are huge in their own individual's life. But we passed just last week 100 wins not advertised, but promoted by the Academates, which was incredibly heartwarming to read. So, proof in the pudding of how it's helping people in their lives. But we'll dive into that later, because we have an incredible interview with Kia Abdullah. Mark, tell us a bit about Kia.
Kia is an author and a travel writer from London. Her novel, Take It Back, was named one of the best thrillers of 2019 by The Guardian and The Telegraph. Her latest novel, Next of Kin, is out in September. We don't normally do interviews before a book comes out, but we're doing this because of the pre-orders. And for this book's pre-orders, Kia is doing something extraordinary. And if you can help her out with this, it would be amazing. We also discuss writing difficult subjects and issues, how to decide if you're the right person to write a story, representation, and how travel feeds a writer's imagination.
Excellent. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the wonderful Kia Abdullah.
Kia Abdullah, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm very well, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I'm so excited because not only are we here to talk about your fabulous new book, Next of Kin, but you, for the pre-orders, you are doing something extraordinary. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so basically, I am donating all my profits from pre-orders of Next of Kin to the Trussell Trust, which is a food bank charity, when those orders are placed either via my website, kiaabdullah.com, or Castle Hill Bookshop in Yorkshire.
Brilliant. Why the Trussell Trust?
Mark, I grew up in Tower Hamlets, which is one of the UK's worst areas for child poverty. The rate is about 57% now and may well have been higher when I was younger. And I benefited from free school meals. But to be honest, I never really thought about it very much until Marcus Rashford's work last year. And he campaigned to have free school meals continue throughout the various lockdowns and school holidays. And that reminded me that food insecurity is still a problem in the UK and just how detrimental it can be. And the Trussell Trust do incredible work in this area. Last year, they donated 2.5 million food parcels to those in crisis, and almost 1 million of those went to children. And I believe that's a 33% increase on the year before. So the pandemic has had a huge and dramatic effect, and that will probably continue for years to come.
What an amazing idea. How did that, when you have an idea like this, because this is coming through your website and it's coming through an independent bookshop as well. I mean, it's what are the logistics? Are you going to be there boxing and packaging stuff yourself? With all the orders?
I mean, I probably will be. You have to put in the elbow grease. So partly it was because I wanted to help my local bookshop. In the pandemic, they've had such a difficult year because they've been deemed as non-essential, as we all know. And Castle Hill is a tiny little bookshop in Richmond in North Yorkshire. And so I was going to funnel my pre-orders through them anyway. And I thought, well, after the work of Marcus Rashford, it was so inspiring. And I thought, I'm in a position to be able to help. And so why not join forces with my local bookshop and basically engineer this campaign. So they'll be talking to HarperCollins and ordering the copies, and I'll be going in and signing them and most likely helping packing as well.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, folks, we're going to put a link in the show notes. But if you go to kiaabdullah.com/books/next of kin, you can order it there. I've got my copy on order, Kia. I'm looking forward to receiving it. It just seems
You're
like such
amazing. Thank you, Mark.
well, that's the thing. It's I get a great thriller. I get a signed book. That's always good. I get a book through the post, which is always a joy. But if there's any way to help out, that's just a bonus. So I think it's such a wonderful idea. Now, the book is out on September 2nd, and if someone's listening to this after publication and thinking, oh, I wish I could do that, can they still get involved?
They can. So up to 2,000 copies, I will be donating my profits to the Trussell Trust. So if we haven't hit the figure yet at publication date, that will carry on, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. But hey, look, let's talk about the book that they get for their money. Tell us about Next of Kin.
Yes, so Next of Kin is a courtroom drama in which a London architect called Layla Saeed receives a panicked phone call from her brother-in-law one morning. His son's nursery have called to ask where little Max is. Layla was supposed to drop him off at nursery that morning, but she forgot that he was in her car. She races to the car park and realizes the horror of what she has done. And what follows is an explosive criminal trial that pits one sister against another. And through that framing, explores the themes of motherhood, childlessness, and the ways in which society treats women based on whether or not they have children. And like my previous two courtroom dramas, it can be read as a pure thriller, but it also asks the reader to engage with some deeper issues as well. Excellent stuff. I do want to talk about that because you're not one to shy away from subjects that can be difficult to write about. I mean, gender roles, cultural expectations, religion, identity, race. Do you ever think, oh, I can't put that in, or I can't do that? Or do you just rush in and fortune favours the bold? Does anything kind of give you pause? It's tricky, Mark, because when I started writing my first courtroom drama, Take It Back, it was before, these discussions around kind of cultural appropriation and cancel culture and all of this in a difficult climate that we're in at the moment. And the central premise, which is 4 Muslim boys are accused of rape by a disabled white girl, it is quite incendiary. And I certainly didn't shy away from it back then. I wonder if I would have thought twice about it now. I like to think that I wouldn't. When I'm writing, certainly kind of, in the flow, I don't shy away and I don't self-censor, because I don't think there's any point of writing a kind of falsely sanitized version of reality in fiction. I think part of the role of fiction is to reflect the world as we see it. So no, I'm really attracted to those kind of dark contemporary issues. There may come a time when I think, that issue isn't really mine to write about. I did briefly think about writing a story about the trans issue, but look, I don't have any trans friends. I'm not trans. And so I just thought, well, if I'm not fully engaged in that world, maybe it's not my place to write it. So there have been times where I've had to kind of assess my motivations for writing a story. But when I've kind of decided on a plot, I don't tend to self-censor, no.
That's really fascinating, because this is a conversation we're seeing going around on Twitter at the moment about, is this your story to tell? And if it isn't, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for your glory, or for, to help out, a certain, faction of our culture? And it is, it's a question you have to ask yourself, isn't it? Why am I writing this? What drives me to write this? And can I tell this from a position of truth? That's a line we all have to cross, isn't it?
Exactly. And you also have to see whose voices are missing. And so if you want to write, say, a trans piece of fiction, are there enough trans writers out there writing their own stories? And if so, if you can actually count 5 books by trans people or 10 books by trans people, then maybe that's fine for you to throw your voice in the hat, so to speak. But if there aren't, then you have to question, am I actually taking somebody else's role? Because as you know, Mark, the way publishers work, if they have their India book for the year, they're probably not going to publish another India book for the year because they've already got that. And so, if you're not Indian, but you've taken that kind of Indian novel of the year, then you are actually taking that from somebody else. And so it is it's a minefield. I think, look, the solution is just to have more diversity. One thing I struggled with when I started was the kind of burden of representation. Because I was one of the few Muslim writers out there, there was all this pressure on me to write a positive story. And, as I said before, I don't see any point in writing a kind of falsely positive story because you're trying to represent, over 1 billion people. The solution is just to have more writers from that demographic and a natural proliferation of positive stories. The writer Aisha Malik grapples with race in her book, This Green and Pleasant Land, but does it in a very light touch, humorous way. Yeah. My book, Take It Back, does it in a gritty way. A third Muslim writer might do it in the context of a rom-com or a sci-fi or a farcical comedy. If there are more of us, there will be more stories, and that's the solution.
Amen to that. Fantastic stuff. I'd like to talk about where it all started for you, because from what I can gather, you were writing really since you were 6 years old, and stories were how you connected with your mother. Is that right?
That's true. Wow, so you dug deep there, Mark. Yeah. So look, my mother and I, we never really had a very strong bond, but it was through stories that we really bonded. So storytelling's always been important to me. I remember being about 4 years old and basically refusing to eat unless she told me a story. In Sylheti, my mother tongue, the phrase is "Kichaho," tell me a story. And so that instilled an early love for storytelling. And I grew up writing my own. I remember when I was about 10 or 11, leaving primary school for secondary school, one of my teachers, bless him, gave me a notebook and pen and said, when you're on public transport and you hear interesting snippets of conversation, write it down in your notebook and use it in your own stories. And that early vote of confidence meant so much to me, which is why I always say to adults, if you see a spark of promise or ambition in a child, tell them, because you don't know where that's going to lead. And so I was always writing. But Mark, when it came to choosing my degree, I kind of followed the money. I'm from an immigrant background. I didn't know anybody who was a writer or a journalist or making a living from writing. And so I followed the money. But to be honest, I don't regret that, because it's those 3 years in tech that allowed me to take the 50% pay cut I needed in order to take a full-time role as a writer.
Wow. Was there any point where you thought, because you're not seeing yourself in publications on books or whatever, was there any point where you thought, oh, I'm going to give up? Or did you just, what kept you going through all of that?
I think, again, I come back to the power of storytelling. So for me, one of the books that were really formative when I was younger was Anne of Green Gables, and this is about a red-haired, freckled, white orphan child in Canada, as far away from me as you could possibly get. But I related to her because she didn't allow all these expectations to pull her back. And that really changed my way of viewing the world and made me into a bit of a feminist, to be honest, because Anne was probably the kind of first real feminist I read in fiction. And so I do believe in the kind of transcendent power of fiction and good characters. It doesn't always need to be linked to identity. And so I think I still saw myself in fiction, but in terms of characteristics. And so I don't think I ever felt discouraged by the fact that I hadn't seen any kind of Asian characters in fiction.
Excellent. That's so wonderful to hear. We love hearing about writers' writing habits on the podcast. I saw somewhere you're a 1,500 word a day writer. Is that right?
Yes. So when I'm on deadline, that can crank up to 2,000, but 2,000 awful, terrible, bad words. And then I'll go back and edit 1,500 words a day. I'm not sure if that's sustainable, Mark. Right now, I'm on a book a year contract, but I think if I do get another book deal, I probably will push for one every other year. I just, because I also run a travel blog, and before the pandemic, I was on the road for 3 or 4 months of the year. And so both of those things were quite difficult to tackle. And now that the world is opening up again, the last thing I really want to do is just be at my desk for 6 months straight. I want to go out in the world, and that's really important for writing fiction, I believe, as well. And so we'll have to see what happens.
Well, that segued perfectly to my next question, which is, I know you're a travel writer, and I was looking at the list of places that you've written about: the Maldives, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, French Polynesia, you're thinking azure seas, blue skies, golden sands, a gentle breeze coming in off the sea. And you've spoken about how travel inspires your writing. How did you keep the creative fires burning in lockdown, locked inside?
Oh, God, it has been really difficult. So for me, being out in the world is such an important component of fiction. I talked about my teacher who said, when you're on a train or a bus and you hear interesting snippets of conversation, write them down. And so when I hear, a distinctive laugh or an interesting feature in a face, I'm always, I'll be having that. And so writing fiction in a vacuum has definitely been really difficult for me. Last week, I was in a restaurant and I saw this gentleman walk in with his wife and 2 kids, and he was, in glasses, looked very straight-laced, but he was in a hoodie and the back of it said "Born to Defy." And I thought, he's an interesting character. Is he wearing that ironically, or does he have a warped sense of his own identity, or is he actually an anarchist? And so just seeing interesting people feeds into my fiction. And so I'm just really enjoying being out in the world, listening to people, hearing conversations. It has been really difficult under lockdown, to be honest. I have struggled to write fiction, but I'm of the kind of brute force your way till the end, don't stop, don't look back, and then go back and try to polish. Sometimes it's putting lipstick on a pig, but you've got to persevere.
Where are you going next? What's the next travel destination for you, Kia?
Right. So theoretically, it's a huge one, Mark. It's Antarctica in November. No. And so we were booked on that to go in December last year for work on commission for the travel blog that I run. And then obviously because of the pandemic, it got postponed. And so we have been rebooked in November, but it all depends on what's happening in the world. Obviously, the priority is to be able to travel safely and make sure you're not putting people in danger at the destination to which you're traveling. But fingers crossed, if the world, starts to return to normal, Antarctica in November is the big one.
Fantastic. And what's coming up for you next in the writing world?
So Next of Kin is out on 2nd of September, and I'm currently on deadline for the 4th novel, which is due at the end of September, crazily. So, as you're often working on one book, promoting the other and editing another. And so I'm kind of have all these balls in the air that I'm juggling. And I also want to kind of get back into writing short form as well. I really like opinion writing, but that kind of falls by the wayside because I'm juggling the kind of travel writing with the fiction. But again, that all depends on, whether HarperCollins give me another book deal. The future looks bright, but we'll see.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Well, Kia, thank you so much for speaking to us today. Folks, let's just remind ourselves, Next of Kin, go to kiaabdullah.com/books/next of kin. You can get a signed hardback, it's free postage. Every copy you buy helps the Trussell Trust, and you'll be doing a good thing in the world. And there's, these days, we need as much of that as we can, don't we, Kia?
Exactly. I just want to say thank you to you, Mark, and the other Mark as well, because I love the podcast and you guys are so helpful. When you are on submission or you're trying to find an agent, it's such a lonely time, and you see all these other writers having incredible success, and you remind us of the struggle and of the successes. And so you do such an important job. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy, and hope to speak to you again very, very soon.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. It was so lovely to hear Kia say these words. She said she's got a year book deal, so she has to produce a book every year, but she'd come to the conclusion that she'd much rather do a book every other year. Doesn't that just completely validate everything we were saying before the interview about choose your own adventure? You have to find your own pace at which you want to go.
Yeah. And this is it. I mean, let's talk about how you define success as a writer. And writing and getting published is hard, and it doesn't get much easier even as you go on. I mean, if you're a woman, it's harder. If you're a person of color, it's even harder again. There are gradations of difficulty in this business, but it's never easy for any writer. I mean, I'm a white bloke. I'm working class, but I can pass for middle class. I can do the accent and everything. I worked in publishing, and it's still not a walk in the park. And I think there is a feeling when writers starting out, they'll write one book, they'll get an agent, a publisher, a deal, and it's all peaches and cream. Or they might decide to eschew the whole publishing machinery and go indie, answerable only to themselves, and they can publish what they want, and then it's all peaches and cream. And we know that's not the case. I mean, I can't tell you how many books and scripts I finished before I got an agent, and how many more after, before I got a deal. Whatever path you choose, whatever kind of writer you are, you have one thing in common, and I'll come to that in a minute. But bad stuff happens, and it continues to happen. Rejection, bad reviews, it never stops. But what does change is your reaction to it. Now, when these things first happen, it feels like the end of the world. When it happens to me now, I kind of laugh and shrug and get back to work. But how do you define success as a writer? What are you writing for? Is it for awards, good reviews, money? Well, the problem with those things is you can't control them. Pining after those is only going to bring you unhappiness. I mean, it's a nice surprise if you get one, but But what you can control is your commitment to the reader. And that's what every writer, indie, traditional, hybrid, Kia, you, me, this is what we all have in common, which is the reader. Write for the reader. Write to entertain, to thrill, to frighten, to make them laugh, cry, gasp, keep turning those pages. Do that, and I think you're a successful author. And I think this is something that takes a long time to learn, and this isn't about giving the audience what they want or trying to second guess the market. This is about writing what you are passionate about and making it entertaining. I think back to what Joe Hill told us, why should I read your book? Have you seen what's on Netflix? And I think Kia is the perfect example of this. She writes difficult subjects, but she makes it entertaining. But she's also defining, in her own terms, what is success as a writer. So for her, it's not about having a book every year, but it's about writing the best book she can write every 2 years or whenever she wants. But yeah, write for the reader. Don't chase things that are out of your control, but fulfill that commitment that you have to the reader to be the best writer you can be. And this, for me, is what we're all about, what the podcast is all about, what the Academy is all about, is finding in you that writer and that commitment that you have to the reader and providing them with the best story that you possibly can. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah, it's actually, I mean, there's a tendency as writers that we get a little bit stuck in our own journey and our own kind of career, and it's a lot of, I mean, as writers are by nature very self-reflective and a lot of times we're working in isolation, so we're kind of like we're trapped in our own world so often. But the audience is that connection that is the reason why people do it. Ultimately, there is no other reason why people write a book unless they're writing it for their own benefit, just to sit and read and chuckle to themselves. It's for the audience. And actually, one thing I've learned actually through and then linked to what Kia was saying, I set up a charity in the UK which is called Food Share, and it actually it's a similar kind of charity to Trussell Trust, and it works. It's kind of working with food banks and help, and kids are growing food in schools to donate to food banks and local charities. But the thing that I got from having set that up and working in that charity is this incredible sense of something bigger than myself. It was trying to do something which was for a larger purpose and has more of an impact than just something that you personally benefit from in your own life. And in many ways, that's what writing is. When we sit down to write, what we're trying to do is create a change, a shift, an emotional shift, a different way of perceiving the world in a larger audience, bigger than just ourselves, our own small network. The reason why, and this is really getting to the nub of why we do this, the reason why everyone would love a bestseller is yeah, it would be nice to see your name at the top of the charts, absolutely. But the reason we're actually doing it, if we strip it right the way down and really dig deep, the reason we're doing it is because writers would love to be able to serve, and I say that word very broadly, but serve a largest audience as possible and change people's lives on a biggest scale as possible. And that's what it's about. It's a bestseller is purely a reflection that you have influenced the largest number of people you possibly could have done. And your book, your words, and what your life is will be impacting a larger amount of people. And this is why we show up every day. I mean, we put the bestseller guys around it, but it's about making our life matter, making our life be relevant, and most importantly, using the time that we have on this planet for good in some way, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Every story we write has an impact on someone, if not many, many people. And we never know that. We never know the full impact because we don't get like a updated chart, like can't refresh that page on Amazon and see how many lives you've impacted. Wouldn't that be nice if you could do that? And that's why we do it. So I think it's really important to if you're lost in writing right now, reconnect with the reason why you're doing it. The real reason, the bigger reason, the life reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why authors like Kia are so important, because when she was growing up, she's not seeing authors like her. She's not seeing Muslim authors writing, thrilling fiction. So for someone like her to break through and do the kind of things that she's doing is absolutely brilliant. She did also mention in the interview there an author called Aisha Malik. We did interview Aisha in episode 271. I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can check that out as well, because Aisha, again, writes really great, fun, entertaining, really commercial fiction, but it's fiction that is designed to reach out to readers in the best possible way. Aisha and Kia have this thing where they're writing for the reader. They're fulfilling that commitment to the reader, and they are eliciting a change in them. And you're absolutely right. And the more people you can reach with that, the better. And
exactly.
And the bestseller thing, like you say, it's all cool and fun. But the fact is, if you can I mean, when we did Robot Overlords, it wasn't released properly. Not enough people saw it. But the happiest moment of that whole experience was a couple of years ago at a science fiction convention. And an 11-year-old boy came up to me and he said, "You wrote this?" I said, Yeah. He said, "It's my second favourite film." And it was just, and that for me was absolutely fantastic because, I can imagine, I know what it's like because I sat in my room when I was 11 devouring, books like the Stainless Steel Rat books or Adrian Mole or stuff like that, and having a connection with it. And it sparks a little fire in your brain. And it doesn't mean everyone who reads your book's going to go on to be a writer, but it might make them think about the world in a slightly different way. It might make their day a little bit happier, a little bit brighter. They might be thrilled. It might make them cry. It might make them think about, a member of the family that they've not spoken to in a while. Maybe they pick up the phone, anything like that. I know great books have done that to me. They've moved me in a way that have made me think, maybe seeing the world in a slightly different way. And that's success.
Yeah.
That is success.
I think, there's a whole other tapestry that's weaved as well when you read a book. I'm reading a book right now called The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Frye. It's about a guy who kind of just decides to walk to Scotland from the south of England. He's 65 and retired and is, humdrum life, and just pops down to the post a letter one day and keeps walking. It's really interesting. And I read that book and I think, well, that's not me. I'm not retired yet. I'm not 65. But what I found is just reading this book about this guy reflecting on what he's done with his life and all the failings and all the misgivings and all the things he wished he'd done. And now he's doing this big adventure. I'm finding it's weaving a tapestry in my own thought process during my day of making me question these things. Like ask myself, what's important right now? And so sometimes a book isn't like that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, revelation, or I never thought of the world, like I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to change how I'm. But I think it's that subtle weaving, this undercurrent that we get when we live with a book, when we're reading that book. And, that for me is as impactful and almost has a longer term impact on how it changes someone's life than a book that hits you in the face and makes you think, wow. And it's just, there's so many intangibles. I as a stats guy, right? I wish we could measure this stuff because there's so many intangibles that we cannot touch and feel. Like as a writer, like I said, you will never know the impact your book has had on the greater world. All I can say is that whatever impact you think it's had, it will have had more. It will have more because you never know all the people who've read it, your Amazon sales show this number, but how many people have then given that book to someone else to say, you've got to read this book? And how many times have you actually got an email from someone, a reader, telling you, wow, your book changed my life? Very, very rarely. But then I always flip that question. How many times have we written to an author whose book has changed our life and told them that? Very rarely, if ever. It's not that it's not having an impact. It's just that we don't think to actually send those emails, right? We don't think to make a point because we think, well, they're not going to, so-and-so's not going to read, this best-selling author's not going to read my email. Yes, they will. And it'll be the best email they've got all year. So challenge to everyone. If a book's changed your life this year, write and tell the author. And you might get a response. You might actually get a response. I did it with Terry Pratchett. I did it with Tom Clancy. Richard Branson I wrote to once, got a response from. It's like bonkers. People appreciate that feedback. And it also teaches you of the greater story that's going on with your book in the world. And that's why, folks, that's why you must write. It's not a case of writing when you have the time. It's not a case of, waiting till retirement. Retirement might never come. It didn't come for my wife, right? She had dreams of writing many books. She got her one book written, but it didn't. So you've got to grab this opportunity today and write today 200 words. Write 200 words today and you'll be 200 words ahead of where you were yesterday. And your writing will be a little bit better than it was yesterday. But don't put this off anymore. There are too many people in this world that lie on their deathbed and have those regrets. We don't have the luxury of time in our life. to wait to do things. We have to do it now. We have to get on with it. So, gosh, we've gone very deep today, haven't we? But this is why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, I we have a lot of fun on this podcast, but there are moments where we have to really acknowledge the importance of what writing is in your life and what writing does to those around you and who you then inspire through writing. Like you said, Mark, I mean, who knows if that little 11-year-old boy, he might be writing robot fan fiction for all you know. He might be the next Steven Spielberg because he starts writing and doing movies because he was inspired. Because again, if you think back to who you met as a kid, do you remember that feeling? Do you remember that feeling when we were like, young, early teens? That feeling of like the excitement of a book. That childlike magic of disappearing off into a fantasy world. And we still get that today as adults. There's very few things in life that stick with us, right?
Yeah.
We look back on our childhood and with nostalgia and think, oh, if only I could experience that again, the excitement, the high. A book keeps us connected all the way through our life. And that's what everyone's creating who's listening to this podcast. They are writing magic, right? It excites me to think about the benefits, but it's hard work and we don't beat around the bush on this podcast. We don't try and make it out to be easy. And that's why we've got the Academy. That's why if you want to have a journey, a supportive journey, and some people looking out for you in a community that are cheering you all the way, not a community that are on Facebook, on some massive group of 50,000 people where they're all talking about how much money they've made. That's good. That's good for measuring things. And that's necessary and important. I do think those are good things. But you need to also have a group of like-minded authors who are all being real about how hard the journey is, being real about the challenges, being real about their mental health issues, being real about the critic in the head that's still telling them they're not good enough and they're thinking of quitting. Don't quit. You can't quit because you can quit from writing, but writing will never quit you. You'll get back to it.
Let me talk about one of our friends of the podcast, Sarah Pimbra. Okay. Now, for a lot of people, Behind Her Eyes might be the first time they heard of her because, big Netflix show. And they might think, oh, overnight success. Well, Sarah's first book, I think was The Hidden, was published in 2004. So she wrote a whole bunch of horror novels for a publisher called Leisure Books. And I'm looking at a wiki here, so she did one a year from 2004 right through to 2009. So that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books there. Then she did some Doctor Who tie-ins, Torchwood tie-ins. She wrote some short stories. She did a trilogy for Gollancz, the Dog-Faced Gods series. She did 3 fairy tales. And then she did a bunch of standalones. She did a couple of fantastic books for Gollancz, like The Death House, 13 Minutes. Then, let's have a look. 13 years after the publication of her first book came Behind Her Eyes. She also did the Nowhere Chronicles as well before that. So, she's written 15 or so books before she got the big one. And I can tell you, she paid her dues. There's no overnight success, but I know Sarah has that commitment to the reader. She's when you read Behind Her Eyes, it's all about, she's promised you a thrilling, page-turning story, and she's delivered. And, she's got rid of that first chapter that didn't work and that fourth chapter that didn't work. It's all about giving the reader the best time possible. And that's, she paid her dues and she hits the big time because of that. And I can't tell you how many failed novels I've got, for unfinished novel scripts, finished novels that went out and never got anything. Persistence, it is a long game. It's not a question of, as we said in our first year, 12 months, and then we put a book out and that was great fun. But for me, that was one stepping stone in a much longer journey. And you just have to keep at it and don't give up and don't give up. And as long as you keep fulfilling that commitment to the reader, you are a success and you will get better and you will improve. And, you never know, you might end up like Sarah. But to be honest, as long as you keep making that connection, you're a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing each day means you're writing, means you're a writer. And actually, it's kind of interesting. We talk about this choose your own adventure within the Academy. It is not about having to write a book in a year. That's just the challenge that we like to lay people down. Some people have written their book in a year. Other people are still struggling with their first draft. And other people have finished their first draft. Other people have got their manuscript, with an editor now. So everyone's at different stages. To be challenged to do something gives you a bit more of an incentive to aim for that goal. But if somebody takes 5 years to write a book in the Academy, we celebrate that as much as someone that writes a book in 3 months, right? Because it's a recognition of whatever else is going on in their life. They may not be able to write a book in a year, but it's really brilliant. And I actually want to celebrate a few of the wins that we've seen in the Academy. And one of the things that we're going to be starting to do on this podcast is highlighting some of the academates who are already on that kind of road to success. And ironically, this week we were going to start this new spotlight feature with Adam Jarvis, who we've travelled with in the Academy the last year. And ironically, just before we were going live with this show, we found out that Adam had announced that he's received a full request from an agent for his book. He's been working hard and he's been so dedicated to the cause.
So
it's been
hard.
Incredible,
yeah. Absolutely
brilliant. But the delight of his post, you could read his joy. I've actually got a full request. But so Adam's off and running. Things are happening, but we're still going to do this spotlight because we think, well, he's had one interest from an agent, but let's get some other agents interested. So Adam has written a book called Ribbon Road, which is a middle grade fantasy. And we're in the Academy, we ask people to create their book hook, which is their short one-liner, which kind of draws people in. So this is Adam's book hook for Ribbon Road. Trapped in the multiverse, a 13-year-old loner discovers she can amplify magic and must learn to work with others to defeat a sentient black hole.
Nice.
So if you're an agent listening to this show and that appeals to you and you want to get in touch with Adam, then drop us a note at the Bestseller Experiment on the contact form, and we will put you in contact with Adam. And he's an incredible writer. I mean, you've coached him directly, Mark, haven't you, in the one-to-ones that we do?
We've had the one-to-ones and the monthly coaching as well. We've had great conversations. And I mean, talk about someone who is committed to being a great writer and, fulfilling that commitment to the reader as well. I look at Adam and it's just a matter of time. That's all it is. It's just a matter of time.
Absolutely. And so if you're interested in finding out more about Adam and his journey, his website is adamjarvisauthor.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Nemakocy, which is Nemacocy. Nemacocy. So Adam, we've got all our fingers crossed for you, and obviously we continue to supporting you in the Academy. So Mark, we've got a lot of other wins that have happened as well this last couple of weeks, haven't we? What stood out for you?
Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. And we've got Anne, who says this is going to seem absurdly small to many folks, I'm sure. But I've written at least 200 words every single day for 7 days in a row. This is not my norm, and it feels like I'm charting a new course. Hopefully, my post will encourage others to share the small stuff. Special thanks to my buddy Carl for keeping me on my toes. So that's someone at the beginning of their journey, those first few steps, 200 words every day for a week. We say to people, try it for 5 days, try it for a week, see if it sticks. And Anne started that. And this is it. Here she goes. She's off. That momentum is already building.
Yeah. And that's as big a breakthrough as finishing your book. because without that, you don't finish a book in many cases, right? So that's incredible, Anne. Congratulations on doing that. And, we mentioned Adam as well, like looking, I think he mentioned that he just hit 300 words. He's been doing 300-day consecutive writing. But others as well, we've had, I scanned down through the list on this Share Your Wins. We've had, Hunting Her manuscript is officially done, Sam said that she was kind of sad in a way because she didn't quite hit her deadline. She was off by a month or two, and everyone was like, "Don't be silly! This is amazing! You've done it!" People are so hard on themselves, and I love the fact that people are celebrating, and everyone's celebrating with them. What other wins have you seen, Mark, as well recently?
Well, Denise Ganley said that the anthology that's publishing my very first short story did a cover reveal and has gone live for pre-orders on the Kindle version. It's starting to hit me now. This baby is going live very soon, and people I know and people I don't know will start reading my story. It's both nerve-wracking and exciting. What is super cool is there are other writers who have contributed to the book, and I'm genuinely a fan of their work. So it's a total pleasure to have my name in black and white with theirs, especially for my first publication. And the anthology is called So West, Love Kills, and it's a Sisters in Crime Desert Sleuths anthology. And that's coming out on September 6th, so really, really soon. So do check that out. But that's, first short stories. And again, going back to talking about Sarah Pimbra, that started out with short stories and getting published. And, we had Mel last week getting published in Clark's World. This is how careers start. So big congrats to Denise.
And I love as well, I'm just flicking back through the last 12 months of posts here on the Share Your Wins forum. And there was one that things like this really jump out. Like Sandra said that she received welcome feedback on her web page from a reader of her medieval fantasy, The Guardian Forest. That's by Sandra Hunter, and she said that this a person said loved all the characters, can't wait for the sequel. And when you hear that there's someone there waiting for that next book that you're really struggling with, and you're like, oh, and that there's someone out there who appreciates what you do. She said, I really needed to see this at this time and was thrilled. Now, so it's, and she said, it helped to break through some of the kind of the paralyzing fear that her sequel was causing her. So I think it's so important to remember as well that these are all like reader feedback. Again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's so important to keep the fuel going. And getting to the end, getting that book out there is so important, because that's when you can start to get that kind of feedback where you see that what you're writing is relevant. People are appreciating it. You have an audience and they want more.
The connection with the reader. Absolutely everything. Well, look, folks, if you want to get in touch, drop us a line. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com and you'll find a contact tab there. Tell us about the successes, your connections that you've made, how you're getting on with your writing. We're also on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is @bestsellerxp. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, if you enjoyed listening to Kia and have been inspired by her, then tell your friends, spread the word, give us a star rating on your podcast supplier. Those things always help make us more visible and get the word out to more writers out there.
Excellent stuff, folks. And remember, if you want to get involved in the Academy, join us this September for the journey of a lifetime. You will be blown away by what we have on offer there. But you only have 2 weeks from when this podcast goes out to get your application in. So get your applications in before the 31st of August in order to join us at the first week in September for the most incredible journey. And we've got so many incredible things planned over the next year, Mark, as well for the Academy. I haven't even got time to go into all of them, but just watch this space. We'll talk a little bit more about it on the podcast in the future, but do join us. We'd love to have you. So pop along to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com and get your application in now. So Mr. Stay, have a great week. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've got some brilliant interviews coming up and some very interesting names.
We got just a teaser. We've got Piers Torday, who's amazing. Steve Kavanagh is coming back, and Sarah Denzel as well. And there's one name, not 100% confirmed yet. I just want it, but very, very exciting. The Triumphant Return. of one of
Triumph
our
and
very
return
popular
for one of our very early, shall we say,
Yeah.
very early potential.
Yep.
If you enjoyed the first season, you may recognise that person's name. No more clues, folks. But it's been absolutely brilliant, Mark. Have a fantastic week, and it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Ta-ra!
Goodbye.
Bye!